Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond, Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, assessing the Ugandan education sector. How can we ensure quality education considering the challenges and opportunities that prevail? ActionAid is commemorating 30 years of working with the poor and thousands of other organizations to ensure that Uganda is free of poverty, injustice, and dignity. The organization, which is spread out in 49 districts countrywide, is one of many that struggle each day to support the efforts of government and communities in overcoming challenges that have been identified as priorities. In commemoration of the 30 years, the organization is reflecting on its operations and also accounting to the public by highlighting what has been achieved and those tasks that are yet to be done. A statement posted on the website of the organization states, "While we are sorry that our dream has not come true, and even worse, that it is not shared by all, we are proud of our achievements throughout the 30 years. Education is critical in nation building and transformation, and in commemoration of the 30 years, ActionAid is focusing on how to promote quality education in Uganda under the theme, Quality Teachers for Quality Education." Today, two organizations petitioned Parliament about challenges in the education sector, blaming some of them on the introduction of pre-education. They also decried the low funding and facilitation of the sector, which has led to a demoralized workforce among other critical challenges. So on Spectrum tonight, we join ActionAid in marking the 30 years by tasking its officials to explain the vision of the organization and if at all it is being realized. We'll also be looking specifically at the education sector, where ActionAid has invested millions of dollars over the last 30 years. We'll then look at proposals they are making to improve the education sector and what is required to make such proposals work in this country. Our guests tonight, Mr. Henry Nixon Ogwal, Director of Partnership Funding and Sponsorship at ActionAid Uganda. You're most welcome, Mr. Ogwal.
Thank you, listeners.
We're also joined by Ms. Sophie Kyagulanyi, Coordinator of the Participatory Democracy and Governance Program at ActionAid Uganda. You're most welcome, Mrs. Kyagulanyi.
Thank you, Edmond, and thank you, our listeners.
Mr. Ogwal, what has ActionAid been doing since it came 30 years ago?
Thank you very much, Edmond. ActionAid, I think, briefly started working in Uganda as a cross-border initiative. Globally, ActionAid is an organization that was formed in 1972 in UK, and that's when it started working in Kenya. So in 1982, the Bishop of Mityana, Bishop Yokana Mukasa, went to Kenya and invited ActionAid to come and intervene when we were having a lot of issues after war effects in Mityana. So that's when ActionAid came to Uganda. However, right now, as we talk about ActionAid Uganda, it is a national organization. It is registered under the laws of Uganda with a governance board, a general assembly that sits every year, so that gives it a total Ugandan mandate. But you will learn later that we are also now just a member of a global federation of ActionAid International. ActionAid, as of now, is working in over 50 districts in Uganda, and we have got over 12 offices in different districts that enable us to reach, together with the partners we work with, these 50 districts. And we work with 80 partners on whom we actually take a lot of responsibility on. Number one is providing technical guidance and supporting building of their programming ability to understand poverty and to address it, but to involve people more, so that the development we do are people-driven development, what others may call capacity building. Next to this is we also make available resources and about 65% of our resources that we have are spent through these partners, not through Action Aid. And the other thing that you might find interesting to know is that while we have been here for 30 years, we have evolved a lot. We started by doing relief program in 1982 up to around 1992, when we actually transformed to integrated community development. And in all this, we were still having so many staff. But later on, we found that all this, while we sank a lot of boreholes, we built valley dams, we constructed roads, we did immunization, we built maternity units, lots of infrastructure. But we also trained teachers, clothed teachers, stocked books at schools. We did a lot of those kind of work. We found at that time, yes, while it was relevant, because government was low in outreach, had very few staff, revenue collection was very low, probably there was need. But we found with the time, context changed. Government now collects more tax revenue. Not only that, there is now decentralization came, which ensured that now there is more government staff, technical staff. We find at sub-county level, we have graduate sub-county chiefs. So we needed to change the context. But also, that kind of work we were doing was not sustainable. People were just looking at development as given to them, and their decisions were not being taken. So we shall be talking later about what this means to us. So we have changed to beginning looking at addressing root causes of poverty. And this is what is very important for us to be talking about now, that there are lessons we have learned in the 30 years that we would want to share. That next week we shall be having 2 full days at Hotel Africana with a lot of events. We shall be having on Tuesday morning a program with the corporate sector, trying to explain to the corporate sector how the developed world really uses money from corporate sector for development, and that even money that civil society uses, the civil society use here, come from corporate sector. We want to explain that, and also to explain that a corporate sector that invests in development has got more say on government. So that's one. Secondly, we will also want therefore to tell them to contribute to development. And by the end of the day, that day we shall be having academic symposium. We are asking ourselves, in 30 years, what have we learned, what are we relearning, and what are we unlearning? Good things we want to pick. The things that we have been doing poorly in the development sector, we must drop. And we will have this list. And the things that we have done well, we shall go ahead with. The second day, we shall be meeting the donors, a breakfast meeting, that is on 28th. And there we shall be looking at how best to fund development of the country, both government and civil sector. Then in the afternoon, we shall then round it up with recognition of the different players, government institutions, civil society organizations, eminent development players as individuals who are Ugandans who have impacted the world. So that's why we are celebrating Action Aid's 30 years, to explain and share our learning, to pick this learning and use it to solve Uganda's current problems, which are various, but most of all, to appreciate the people who have contributed to Uganda's development this far.
That's a remarkable outlook. Obviously, we look forward to hearing more about this. How you transited, the program transition from relief and aid to something else. We'd like to know exactly what that means and what lessons other civil society organizations and other NGOs, local and international, can learn from that. Sophie, could you talk to us a little bit about the education sector in Uganda? How is it structured, and is it the right thing that we need to have, and how can we improve it?
Thank you so much, Edmond. Over time, the education sector in Uganda has changed faces as well. As my colleague has already highlighted, by the time ActionAid came into Uganda, the education sector at that time was more of responding to education in conflict situations. And then we had to respond to education in post-conflict situations. And then now we have to have the education outside conflict and outside post-conflict, meaning that we've moved away from conflict situations, so we should be having stable education systems and structures. And that's when we have the introduction of universal primary education as one of the policies to help the government of Uganda address some of the new faces within the education system. And with this universal primary education, it comes with a lot of benefits, but also it comes with a lot of challenges. Given that it's being tried in Uganda we've now tried it for over 10 years, yes, but we've had a lot of learnings with it. And as a government, we are taking stock of these learnings and making changes here and there. But from a civil society perspective, and specifically from ActionAid perspective, we're having issues around whether the universal primary education actually answers to the needs of education for Ugandans.
You're questioning UPE?
We are questioning because...
It's very popular, people like it, children go to school.
Yes.
What's wrong with it? What can go wrong with such a plan?
Children can go to school actually, and can be in school, but they're not learning. For a nation that is to develop over time, such an education system will be crippling the development of that nation. So if we just have children going to school for a given period of years, 10 years, and they're not learning, what sort of population do we expect to have that period? So we're checking our specific sector and bringing out some of the challenges we are having with it so that it can be addressed within. We are not saying that it's a poor policy and it's poor system from government. We are actually applauding it, but we want to make it the best policy we've ever had in education to take us to the development we want for now, Vision 2016, for instance. So if we want to have that developed nation by Vision 2040, Vision 2060, we must invest highly in education. That's the sort of
that point. You talk about UEP, and I'd like you to talk to us about the other sections. But I was listening to Dr. Donald Kaberuka, he's the president of the African Development Bank, and he emphasized it's not just education, a quality education is very important. And many people have complained that UPE really passes out half-baked people. And there's automatic promotion every year. The teachers can't even speak English, some of them, and so it's not a good quality education. So what you're saying, Sepa already said it, it's not sensation, it's not negative, you're not being negative. I'm also looking at a report called by Uwezo. It's an international group. They said, basically that UP is not a very good program because children are not learning the way they should learn. Continue, madam.
So what we are saying is that both we should be able to address the formal and the non-formal education, because all those are components within education. And the addressing the formal and the non-formal would require that we have sufficient policies, sufficient institutions, well-resourced institutions that are adequately staffed, adequately resourced to be able to take us to that development that we want as a country. You already are aware that by the time we started, let me use the example of UPE, by the time we launched the Universal Primary Education program and policy for Uganda, the education budget alone was 20 to 21% of the national budget. But as we've gone ahead to implement UPE and probably other programs within the education sector, it has decreased to a level of 14% in 2012-2013. So if we're to really look at education as one of the end routes to development in this country, I think we need to revisit that and sort of like try to challenge ourselves as citizens of this country, but also as government. We need to be able to challenge ourselves on our own policies and be able to answer whether those policies are answering to the needs of education today and the tomorrow we want to be as a country. Thank you.
That's remarkable, listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight, assessing the Ugandan education sector. How can we ensure quality education, considering the challenges and opportunities that prevail? Our guests tonight, Mr. Henry Nixon Ogwal, Director of Partnership Funding and Sponsorship at ActionAid Uganda. It's one of the country's top 4 international NGOs. It's been in the country since 1982. It came shortly after the chaos of Idi Amin. Idi Amin was expelled in April 1979. They came in 1982. They started in Mubende, that was the first development area, after being invited by an Anglican bishop. Our second guest, Miss Sophie Kyagulanyi, coordinator of the Participatory Democracy and Governance program at ActionAid Uganda. You'll be able to call in and contribute to this discussion, and even ask them questions at some stage. Mr. Ogwal, I know you would like to comment about this, but I would like you to talk to us about this program transition, how you moved from relief provision to the current scenario, and what some other NGOs might be listening and they want to learn about programming.
You see, from the very beginning, ActionAid actually prioritized education. That when we started working in Mityana, that relief-related program was actually supporting education. The first that we had to do as ActionAid was to even dress teachers.
They didn't have decent clothes.
I'm telling you that teachers at the rural areas, men for instance, had their trousers torn on their buttocks. Now, they could not therefore write onto the blackboard and turn their bare bums. So it was that bad that human dignity had to be restored through relief. And that's when you find we had those giving of teachers clothes, paying teachers salaries, you know, recruiting teachers and paying them. That is where we started from. Then building of schools, you know, so we were addressing the needs. That's when now the philosophy of ActionAid comes in. That we first address the condition in which we find people are in. So in that case, we needed to pay fees for children, to dress their teachers, and even provide food at school. But this was not sustainable. But maybe the first question I will be linking to education. Why we focus on education first is that ActionAid recognizes education as a right. As not only a right, but an enabling one. One that if you actually access it, you are able to enjoy the other rights. That's number one. Number two is that education is a tool for development. And that's why it has been said that no country is better than its education system. It's a tool for development. For instance, if you would like to reduce maternal and child morbidity and death, then you increase the level of education of the women alone, mothers, of girls. Automatically this reduces. And then the next, which is most important, is that education is actually a tool for attaining social justice, democracy, rule of law. So yes, while we were providing that relief, was to address that condition. At a certain point in time, we now realize that they couldn't go beyond that. Once people have attained what they want to eat, they are going to school, what next? They needed to participate in development because there were issues of sustainability. So ActionAid then moved into integrated community development and started working with the communities directly using participatory approaches in the early 90s. That's when participatory rural appraisal for development practitioners, they probably know this, but these are different ways of working with the people where you listen to them so that you understand their problem. They are the ones to tell you, they are the experts of their situation.
You don't arrive with a prepackaged solution.
They have lived in that condition, they have lived in that situation, they are its experts. So they will teach you how they have survived. They will tell you what their hindrances are. And by using that approach, therefore, we then started moving away from relief. And that's when now we found we started addressing issues of seeing how to offer extension services in agriculture. We had agriculturists that were doing this. We had the medical staff who were doing immunization, you know, all that kind of thing. Real extension service. We had people who were doing promotion of small businesses, training in entrepreneurship, and many others. We had, that is the point in time when we started running teacher training services during holidays. And therefore, a program was born which was called MITEP, Mitiana Integrated Teacher Education Program, in collaboration with Ministry of Education. And we realized that the supply of teachers would only increase. So we also went into teacher training. And it might be interesting to note at this point that this success of this program has transformed Uganda today. Those are certain things we are sharing a lot in Africana next week, because immediately government then adopted this and used it in Luero and named it LITEP.
From Action Aid's MITEP. Government got LITEP. And it got MITEP, which became now Northern Uganda. And right now it is the TDMS. The teacher development the teacher development process in management. So now, from that point in time, we realized that again, if we listen to the communities, they were still demanding what they could have demanded from government, from Action Aid. So we did immunization, we built schools, we stocked them. Still, we found that was not sustainable. If we were not there, the valley tanks which were sunk were silted up, and still they needed money to desilt it. So now that is when we found it was important to move to another phase where people are trained to understand and address what we now call their position in the decision-making hierarchy. Right.
Yeah. So that is when we now begin to highlight issues of people mobilizing themselves, looking at government budget, seeing how the government plan starts in September, August.
Yes.
By meeting at a parish level. So then this matched with the work we were doing before, because this parish development committee, we started it in early 90s, in the early 90s.
All right. I mean, this is very interesting, of course. Working at Action Aid, I did work at Action Aid in the 90s, and one of the things I learned, many things. I know the places you're talking about. I went there to commission certain roads. Action Aid was doing roads, and I went there to sign off some of them, hospitals and other things. And I witnessed adult education, the kind of things you're talking about. And I learned that poverty is not just lack of money. You could be resource poor, you could be knowledge poor, you could be relationship poor. So there are many dimensions to this. Listeners, we'll go for a break. We'll be back to stay tuned.
Wow, this is a really nice place. So is there something you wanted to tell me, honey?
Sweetie. We've been together for a long time, and I want to take this to the next level. And I think we need to start by dialing 135*1#.
Huh?
MTN Zone allows you to save more for the things you love. To activate, dial *135*1# to enjoy up to 99% discount on all your calls.
Honey, is that all?
No, honey. We should have ordered for more soup, huh? Waiter!
MTN. Everywhere you go.
Let's get this party started.
Discover the new invigorating taste of Red's Vodka Lemon. Red's Vodka Lemon. Reinvent the night. Not for sale to persons under 18.
Excuse me, guys. Let me through, please.
Yes.
What?
Check this guy. Goodness, dude, what are you doing? Get real.
Just move
Just
a little.
what?
A little bit.
Man, what are you doing bringing a cow into the sitting room?
It's just for when I want milk.
Just what?
Just please move. Let it come and sit here.
What's wrong with this guy?
You cannot keep a cow in your home, but you can get the freshness of its milk straight from the farm into your home. Get fresh dairy milk for freshness straight from the farm every day. Fresh Diary, so fresh.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
education from this level.
Welcome back. Tonight on Spectrum, assessing the Ugandan education sector. How can we ensure quality education considering the challenges and opportunities that prevail? Our guests tonight, Mr. Henry Nixon Ogwal, Director Partnership Funding and Sponsorship at ActionAid Uganda, and Ms. Sophie Kyagulanyi, Coordinator of the Participatory Democracy and Governance Program at ActionAid Uganda. They've been here 30 years, so they certainly know some of the things that they are talking about. Madam Sophie Kyagulanyi, talk to us about, you have this 30 years anniversary. What exactly are you going to be doing? Talk to us about some of the things that you're going to be doing and the new programs. Talk to us about the new programs that you want to, after learning some of these things, talk to us about some of the things, the new things that you want to start doing.
In terms of new things we want to start doing, actually the strategies that my colleague mentioned earlier result from the evolvement that ActionAid has had over the last 30 years. And our experiences have been so much informed by what we have done and how well we've done it, and probably what learnings we pick from that. In 2011, we launched our new strategy, which is the codenamed Embracing Rights, Improving Lives, and this is to take us to a period of
Embracing Rights?
Improving Lives.
Yes.
Which is to take us...
So it's not just improving lives, you have to embrace
the rights within there. Yes. Because for you to be able to improve lives, you must embrace the rights. So it's moving together. And it's to take us for a period of 2012 to 2017. In that new strategy, we are bringing together our learnings. The work we did with education, for instance, over the last 30 years, how does it then inform our new strategy? We are finding, majorly in our last strategy period that we've just implemented, that issues of economic governance and issues of resource, specifically resource allocations to particular social service sectors and public service sectors, speak so much about the commitment and the will of a particular government. And we've learned that for us to be able to have quality education for Uganda, we need to adequately resource our education sector to be able to deliver that quality education. I wouldn't want to go into the details of what are the challenges of this education sector, but it has quite a number of them. And we are finding that for us to be able to adequately resource, for instance, the education sector alone, we need local revenue generated in a big chunk.
How do you do that?
How do we do that? We know that we already have a system of local revenue mobilization and generation, which is the Uganda Revenue Authority, Ministry of Finance, and many of those revenue generating agencies. But we are saying that what does it mean for us to be able to raise or to mobilize sufficient resources to be able to finance our education system together with other public service systems like health, like agriculture? And we are saying that if education has these challenges, and it's the highly prioritized and probably the highest percentage in terms of social service delivery sectors, because it has 14%, agriculture has about 4 to 5%, health has lower, and we're having challenges in education, it means that we need more money. So if we need more money, how is our revenue generation contributing to that raising of more money? We find that we have a lot of losses of revenue within our revenue generation system.
How do we lose that?
Tax avoidance, tax evasion, tax incentives, competition.
Some people being allowed not to pay taxes by government.
Exactly, which is tax incentives. So we find that we have a lot of leakages, which leakages, if they were probably guarded, would have more resources to contribute to our education. And we've done research on this. So you see, we're moving away from only requesting our government to allocate sufficient resources to education. We found that probably they don't have these resources. They have quite a spread list of priorities, and we are saying raise more generation. But we find that in raising more generation, they'll be taxing the same tax group more. And that will be a bigger tax burden.
Exactly. Even the World Bank has complained about these tax holidays. Exactly. Some investors, they don't need them. They've said it. They've carried out a survey. Most investors, over 90%, don't need those tax holidays.
And that's why we are saying that maybe let's look at, do we have leakages in our tax system? Is it an adequate tax system to take us to the development we want and the adequate resources we need for public service delivery? That's where we're now moving. So those are some of the new strategies that we are taking on, moving to that level of generating resources for development for the country.
Sophie, you're talking about governance. What can the ordinary person do to improve their grown governance? The kind of things that you're talking about. How can they help improve?
What we are saying is that each of us has a role to play at our different levels. Roles are played at different levels, yes, but specific roles are played. Roles are played by our decision makers in a different context. For instance, Parliament plays a specific role of oversighting our executive on this specifically. If it's resources, they oversight our executive on the resources package itself. But also, roles are played at the lowest level of the ordinary person. The ordinary Ugandan makes a contribution to tax, for instance. They pay tax. Indirectly or directly, they actually pay tax. So what we are saying is that let us all play our roles. And in playing our roles, it would mean that at some point we'll be charged with demanding accountability from our leaders, that I played my part, what part have you played? So that we hold each other accountable. And for governance, then that will be much more of a participatory perspective, and then we'll be able to participate, all of us, and then hold each other accountable, and our roles will be sufficient to take us to where we want to go.
Nixon, could you talk to us about the 30 years? How are you marking them? You spoke about it a little bit. Can you give us some more detail? Exactly how are you marking these 30 years?
Well, 30 years we are actually marking it together with those that ActionAid has meant a lot to. We have done a 20-minute documentary, which we shall be launching on the 28th at Hotel Africana, for it really to be some very succinct brief as it is, but give the gist of what it has meant for these lives to be impacted in that different way. And also, from a perspective of the people who have been touched, a music has been composed and done, and it is both in video and audio. That again still speaks to the heart of those who have been touched. So we still feel this will be more mobilization and solidarity for people. But other than this, we have done already quite a lot in this celebration. For the last 2 weeks, we have been having a lot of activities at the district levels, where the district authorities, the civil society organizations, the partners we work with, the communities of children and adults, they have been doing a lot of things, reviewing what they have done, singing to themselves. But other than that, pulling issues that still stand as development challenges of Uganda and asking tough questions, tough to ourselves, tough to government, and tough to others. So we are therefore using this celebration to rebuild our own commitment to addressing those Uganda's development issues, but also to use that same space to also task the corporate sector. Like, we shall be meeting them. What is your commitment to taking Uganda to its development aspiration? And we are also asking government, with the different roles that they play, what is it that it is doing? So, at the local level, there has been generation of voices of people. Some have written petitions to their local government, and the local governments have received this very well. For instance, if you talk to people from Nebi, you talk to from Katakwi, there are good reports we are hearing from this, and the districts feel positively challenged. And this is this is our message to the different government institutions, that these challenges that are coming through this mobilization should be taken positively, because these are voices of Ugandans. And therefore, it takes me to the other level, that these are also being generated to be brought centrally. So in Kampala, at Africana, we shall also be sharing this. So that's a very important thing, recommitment of our donors, of government, of side. The other way that we are celebrating this is to call you, Edmond, who has worked with ActionAid, with all the other listeners who have worked with ActionAid, to come for this celebration, because those with outstanding performance in the past
30 years.
and the future, in these 30 years, who have worked with ActionAid. Those that have worked with ActionAid as partners, be it government, funding agencies, yes,
local leaders,
they will find representative of their category that have touched the lives of Ugandans. So by doing what? By actually giving awards. Lastly, I would still want to say that in our way forward, as you actually were asking Sophie how to solve this problem, it's also a part of our celebration, is to share with Ugandans how we look at things in the way we're looking at it. When Sophie talks about issues of financing, is very important. We are therefore saying that you cannot put water in a what? In a jute, in a sack.
Yes.
It will pour.
Yes.
Right now we have a big problem with even the education funding system.
Yes.
There is a lot of what? Of corruption as well, leakages. And in fact, it's not corruption. As civil society, recently you knew that we were part of the mourning of theft of our money. Mourning of theft of taxpayers' money. That we need to ensure that we bring total understanding of every citizen that it is their money, it's not donor money that is being stolen.
It's going to be paid back after taking from our taxes.
But if donor money is being repaid using tax money, then whose money is lost? So what we are therefore saying is that there is need to ensure that we seal the losses, the theft. But the next thing that we must also address is the quality of teachers. No student is any better than the quality of their teachers.
Right.
So that will be very important. Yeah. Quality teachers for quality education.
All right.
The other thing that we will also need to address very importantly is to now work at the local level. There's a methodology that we have, and Sophie will be talking more about it. That is what we call rights-respecting schools.
Yes.
Now, this brings an interplay of the children, the parents, understanding their rights and responsibilities, the leaders, the school management committee, and the teachers, also understanding their responsibilities.
In the past, parents and teachers association.
Yes, and this model uses participatory approaches that raising awareness on roles and responsibilities, and it will help us to ensure that everyone is doing their role. This one we can explain a little later.
All right. I mean, of course, the only time cuts us short, but of course there are other things that Action has done. Children with disability, and so if you can give us some highlights on education budget tracking, violence against girls in education, and how it contributes to contributing to curbing girl child dropouts, dormitory facilities for marginalized areas. Could you talk to us a little bit about those in a minute? Then we can hear from the listeners.
What I can say is that in the new model, which is speaking so much to the new strategy, the new ways of doing things in ActionAid, we are talking about promoting rights respecting schools, and we have a certain set of rights that we've singled out that must be at play within schools, and the singling out of these rights comes from a series of experiences of what we have seen. For instance, we've seen that the whole school environment is very unfriendly to children with disability. We had an intervention at some point of education for children with disability, and we're supporting and working with a particular group in 2 districts in southwestern Uganda who are basically deaf children, and we've worked with them for some time. But the environment within which they are working as a school is not considered to be a specific environment that would attract special policies to address. So one of the rights we are talking about that should be within schools and school environments is the right to not to discriminate. And this non-discrimination will bring in different abilities of different learners and different teachers within a school. But we are also saying that we need to also emphasize the right to free and compulsory education, which we are saying we already have as Uganda. But within it, there is another component, there are other components that we must look at. Right to adequate infrastructure. Adequate infrastructure doesn't mean that you put children under a tree. We are talking about adequate infrastructure to help them learn and develop as children, you know, and probably pupils, and then to other levels. We're talking about right to quality trained teachers. Quality trained teachers mean that they can be able to deliver the same quality of education to the ones that they are teaching. We're talking about right to safe and non-violent environments. This brings in the whole thing about violence against girls. You very well know the numbers or the statistics around child dropouts relating to violence against girls specifically. We have a fully fledged program. We've had a fully fledged intervention as Action Aid over the 30 years on guarding against violence of girls in schools. But here we are saying violence within school and out of school, meaning that even the community has a role to play on specific guarding against violence against girls. We're talking about right to relevant education. Education that will help the learners articulate certain issues in a different perspective. Not teaching our children, for instance, I'm giving an example, but it's not happening. Let me say Greek psychology. Where are they going to use Greek psychology and for what? So you might have a curriculum that is sufficient and is able to take them to a particular level of articulation of issues.
Let me interrupt you there so we can hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum Radio and you can call in now. Our number is 0414-348-111, 031-226-0390, 031-226-1390. Spectrum, hello? Good evening, your name?
Thank you very much for making those kids. My name is Paul. First of all, I thank them for building Action Aid into a very highly reputable organization that has, let's say, clear footprint. Now, my memories of this agency is I remember seeing pictures somewhere of old ladies who had come to the streets of London who are collecting coins and all sorts of things for Action Aid of the children's fund. This, I think, challenges us as Ugandans to develop our spirit of philanthropy. So that all these projects, very nice as I say, and this part of Uganda also must have a financial input in it. The second point I wanted to say is that last week you hosted a program in which there were questions around NGOs. So there's an insinuation that NGOs are all chasing foreign interests. But I also hope it can come out in this program that all these things that I've been saying are generated by Ugandans. They're ideas generated by Ugandans. The ideas for Uganda, and none of them is a foreign interest, or none of them is pushed by a foreign force. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed, Paul. Spectrum, hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Your name? Good evening, sir. Your name?
We have been fighting each other, and never able to prove that doing well, especially in northern Uganda and eastern Uganda. And we are playing a very important role in transforming the lives of teachers, the lives of those who are vulnerable. And my call to other stakeholders to do the same so that this country has not another level.
Thank you, Mr. Oyer. Spectrum, hello? Okay, let's get Madam Sophie, let's get your responses and then okay, yeah, let's get this. Okay, we lost the final part.
My response, thank you for the callers, and for Paul, thank you for the compliments. And indeed, the money Action Aid uses is actually collected like that. It's from poor people. It's not rich people. It's poor people. It's children in schools who contribute, and they contribute as low as £1, you know, to the work that Action Aid does.
4,000 shillings.
Exactly, to the work that Action Aid is doing in Uganda. So if Ugandans had a similar attitude of contributing to their own good and well-being, maybe that's what Paul is talking about.
We see them in bars. They could save money.
Exactly, we can. But it's an attitude issue that we need to address as Ugandans and be able to say for.
To add it immediately.
Yes.
And thank Paul very much. Is the reason for which we are meeting a different
private sector.
Yes.
The corporate sector, for instance. You know, Uganda is very quickly moving to a middle-income country.
Yes.
And once you're growing older, you are supposed to also show signs of maturity. The countries that move to middle-income countries, they begin to cut off aid. You have known now what is happening
Britain has cut off from India. They've stopped giving it.
But it has been happening slowly. Now it's only coming to a climax.
Yes.
Us as Ugandans, we need to know that the responsibility for development is on us, both as individuals and as companies. So we need to develop the art of giving. In fact, we do already have. And Paul, with all others out there, Ugandans live by supporting neighbors, by supporting relatives. Now it is that same way we can do it and work now together and say, let's do it through institutions. So that when the other month you don't have money, your child does not suffer because there's an institutionalized support.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Sophie.
In addition to Paul's question, he was wondering whether the agenda we are pushing as ActionAid is not a foreign agenda. And I must, in response, I can say that I think there is no parent in Uganda, I'm a parent in Uganda, would want or would not want their children not to go to school and would not want their children to get quality education. I am the benefit of my parents wanting me to go to school, and they took me to the best schools, and they invested in that. They did nothing at that time. All the money they had is to invest in my education. So I've benefited from that education. There is no reason why I can't wish that well for my children. So some of these things, it's not for an agenda. It's the well-being of our friends in other countries who want what they've seen as good for them to be good for Uganda. So they make those proposals to Ugandans so that we all develop at the same time.
And most times, many government functionaries, they keep saying, oh, those they have foreign masters. So it's better they begin to talk about local masters. We'll hold them accountable.
Interestingly, if you go to the communities where we work, they don't call us foreign. In fact, the district local governments, different district local governments have given so many awards to ActionAid for its work, for promoting the rights of Ugandan women. It's not British women, it's not South African women, for promoting the education. So I think it's about the issue. And in fact, that only comes when probably we touch on issues which sometimes accountability. But accountability for who? I think we are also talking about accountability for the citizens. So when citizens are mobilizing themselves, then we will ask, who is the organization that is working with this community that these communities are asking these tough questions? But I also want to say that when you look at the policy positions of the Department of Ethics and Integrity, which is in the office of the President, the ideals on which it is built is accountability.
Yes.
And it recognizes that there is problems even at the most high level, but it needs to trickle down.
Right.
So these issues sometimes are raised inconsistently.
They make people uncomfortable.
It only makes people uncomfortable. It also makes the civil society workers probably to fear, but those I think should not make anybody fear, because the mandate that we carry is constitutional, which recognizes that where there are gaps, civil society has got to speak on them.
And there's been some petty harassment. I heard that an actual office was closed down in Gulu when they closed down the office because of staff were taken out to make statements. That's ridiculous by a local government official.
I wouldn't say it's the whole local government officials, but it was the police that insisted to get written statement why our office in Pade was closed on the Monday when all
that sounds colonial. Not even the
organization offices were closed.
Not even colonial. So
we were just asking simply that what was the criminal act that they did to close the office with the civil society?
Maybe the policemen should be the ones to be questioned.
But to date, they have withdrawn the issue. Say we no longer have any issues. You people are also fighting the cause that we also stand for. But the message that comes here is the government officers and officials blow hot and cold from the same mouth.
Yes.
That is not right. That is what some people have said, that we need a government that is consistent to gain more trust of the citizens. And I think that is what the message of the citizens that come, which we hear a lot, that we need a government that does not steal from its own pockets and its citizens. And when that happens, then that's when you find that anybody who raises these issues become a problem. But we are lauded very well by government for the good things we have done, and I don't think that at this point when we are talking we have an issue that they are tracking us down for.
Well, I mean, there's a government official many years ago, as we wind down, who said this person was given money. It was a lady. She was given money to build valley dams, and she told the MPs what going to say. Says you cannot see these valley dams, but you are standing on those valley dams. At that time, I did some work for Action Aid a short while later, and I commissioned the valley dam in Lira, in a patch actually, and I actually saw a valley dam. If you went and stood on that valley dam, you would actually sink because there's water in the Action Aid valley dam. In the government valley dam, at that time, there was no water. It was flat as though it were a road. We have to end on this one. Thank you very much, dear guests. Mr. Henry Nixon Ogwal, Director of Partnership Funding and Sponsorship at Action Aid Uganda. Ms. Sophie Kyagulanyi, Coordinator of the Participatory Democracy and Governance Program at Action Aid Uganda. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. So a remarkable statement that stands out. We need a government that is accountable, that will not steal from its own people. Thank you for tuning in. Have a very good night.
It's the time again.